A family is now grieving the murder of another loved one after a deadly shooting in Durham. 21-year-old Karizma Mebane was shot and killed on Friday night.
A late-night stop at a Durham, North Carolina gas station ended in tragedy. 21-year-old Karizma Mebane, a young woman with her whole future ahead of her, was fatally shot multiple times, 21 gunshots in total. In a matter of seconds, her life was gone and an entire community was left stunned, searching for answers. Two brothers were arrested within hours of the incident, yet the questions that hang over this case remain heavy. Why did this happen? What could have led to such violence? And who was Karizma beyond the headlines and police reports? This wasn't just another crime statistic. This was someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone whose family described her as having a pure heart and a presence that touched everyone around her. The suddenness of her loss is a reminder of how quickly ordinary moments, something as simple as pulling into a gas station, can turn into a life-altering tragedy. As we walk through this story, we'll look not only at the sequence of events but also at the human side, the life Karizma lived, the impact her passing left behind, and the wider questions this case forces us to ask about safety, accountability, and violence in our communities. Her story is painful to tell, but it deserves to be heard, because understanding how and why this happened is part of honoring her memory, and it may help us all reflect on what needs to change to prevent others from facing the same fate. And now I want to ask you, have you ever witnessed something like this in your city? How do events like this change the way you see your own community? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know what state or country you're watching from. It helps me see how far Karizma's story is reaching, and it reminds us all that these tragedies don't just affect one family or one neighborhood. They resonate far beyond. Welcome to Evil Behind Crime. If you're new here, this is where we tell the stories that matter. Stories of lives lost too soon. Stories that ask us to remember the victims, and stories that leave us questioning how justice can ever be enough. When a life is lost in such a sudden and violent way, it's easy for the headlines to reduce someone to just a victim or a statistic. But Karizma Mebane was far more than the details of her final moments. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a young woman with dreams ahead of her. Dreams that were abruptly stolen on that night in Durham, North Carolina. Karizma was only 21 years old, born and raised in Durham, a city where she had deep roots in a close family circle. Friends and relatives describe her as someone who lit up a room with her presence. She had a natural warmth about her, a way of making people feel seen and cared for. To those who knew her best, she was pure-hearted, someone who carried both strength and kindness in equal measure. Family meant everything to Karizma. She wasn't just a daughter but also a sister, one who cherished the bond she had with her siblings. Yet, like so many families touched by tragedy, hers had already suffered devastating loss. In 2020, Karizma's brother, Gaddis, was killed, leaving a hole in the family that could never be filled. Losing him was a wound that still felt fresh just a few years later, and those closest to Karizma say she carried that grief with her while still trying to be a source of light for others. Her stepsister remembers her not only as family, but as someone who showed unwavering loyalty and love. In the wake of Karizma's passing, she spoke with heartbreak about the kind of person Karizma was: dependable, uplifting, and devoted to those she loved. She wasn't the kind of person to let others suffer in silence. Instead, she offered encouragement and support even while carrying her own pain. Though details about her private life remain limited, one thing is clear: Karizma was deeply loved. There are no public records to suggest she had children of her own, but she certainly carried a nurturing spirit. Whether in friendships or within her family, she naturally took on a role of caring for those around her. And while the public may never know all the dreams she held for the future, what's certain is that she had the potential to create a meaningful life filled with connection and possibility. Those who knew her have been left reeling, not only at the brutality of her death but at the loss of a young woman who had so much more to give. Her family now faces the unimaginable task of grieving not one but two young lives, first Tarek and now Karizma. Both were taken far too soon, leaving behind a silence where laughter and love once lived. When we think of Karizma, it's important not to define her only by her final moments at that Durham gas station. She was a daughter whose parents will never again hear her voice, a sister whose siblings will always feel her absence at family gatherings, a friend whose memory now lives in the hearts of those lucky enough to have shared time with her. And for her community, she stands as a painful reminder of how quickly violence can rob us of people who matter. Her story matters not because of the crime itself, but because of the life behind the name. She was not anonymous. She was not forgotten. Karizma Mebane was loved, and in telling her story we honor the person she was, and the future she was never allowed to see. Durham, North Carolina, is a city known for its rich culture, universities, and vibrant communities. But like many mid-sized cities in America, it has also faced challenges with violent crime. In the years leading up to 2024, Durham consistently reported higher than average rates of shootings compared to other cities of similar size. Gun violence had become one of the city's most pressing concerns, with many incidents occurring in places that should feel routine and safe: neighborhoods, shopping areas, and gas stations. Gas stations and mini-marts, in particular, have long been identified as hotspots for violent encounters. They are open late, often 24 hours, and draw people at all times of the night. With money, cars, and people constantly moving in and out, they become places where arguments flare, robberies occur, and crimes unfold in plain view. For many residents, stopping to get fuel or a snack late at night comes with a sense of caution, an awareness that trouble could erupt without warning. The area where Karizma Mebane lost her life, near the intersection of Cheek Road and Hardy Street in East Durham, is one such location. Residents familiar with the neighborhood know it as a busy corridor, but also one where police are frequently called. Streetlights cast a glow over the pavement, but the sense of safety is fragile. The mix of traffic, pedestrians, and late-night activity makes it a place where tensions can quickly rise. Community members say that gas stations in this part of Durham have been the site of multiple incidents over the years. Some involve disputes between people who know each other, while others are tied to random acts of violence. It reflects a larger problem. Public spaces in the city sometimes double as flashpoints for tragedy. For those living nearby, the intersection is part of daily life. People stop there on their way to and from work or late at night when most of the city is asleep. Yet, beneath the ordinary rhythm of cars pulling in for fuel and customers stepping inside for snacks, there's an unspoken recognition of risk. Many locals are not surprised to hear of fights or shootings connected to these locations. But that doesn't make the reality any less heartbreaking. By January 2024, Durham had already been grappling with community concern over how to curb rising gun violence. Conversations about policing, prevention programs, and neighborhood safety were ongoing. But for families like Karizma's, statistics and policy discussions offer little comfort. What mattered most was that a young woman's life ended in a place that should have been just another stop along the road. Friday night in Durham carried its usual rhythm. Cars flowed steadily along Cheek Road, the hum of late-night traffic filling the air as people made their way home, to work, or out with friends. For 21-year-old Karizma Mebane, the night was ordinary at first. A quick stop at the gas station that stood at the intersection of Cheek Road and Hardy Street. It was a familiar spot, a place countless drivers had pulled into without giving it a second thought. Shortly after 10 o'clock p.m., Karizma arrived at the station in her vehicle. Accounts later confirmed that she wasn't there long before tragedy struck. What should have been a routine stop turned into the final moments of her life. Two brothers, later identified as 21-year-old Keon and 22-year-old Keenan Parker, were also present that night. The exact reason for their interaction with Karizma remains unclear, but what is known is that it escalated with terrifying speed. Witnesses described a sudden burst of violence with gunfire erupting across the parking lot. Karizma was struck multiple times. Police would later confirm she had been shot 21 times. The sheer number of bullets fired shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The parking lot, usually filled with the noise of passing traffic and conversation, was overtaken by the rapid succession of gunshots that pierced the night. Several people in the area saw events unfold in real time. Some described seeing the Parker brothers raise their weapons and open fire without hesitation. Others spoke of the panic that followed, customers dropping to the ground, drivers speeding away, and calls flooding into 911 dispatchers. In those chaotic moments, one thing was clear: Karizma had no chance to escape. The barrage of gunfire was overwhelming, leaving her critically wounded before she could react. Durham police were dispatched immediately after reports of shots fired. Officers arrived within minutes, sirens echoing across the streets of East Durham. At the gas station, they found Karizma gravely injured inside her vehicle. The scene bore the marks of extreme violence: shattered glass, shell casings scattered across the pavement, and the silence that follows chaos. As officers secured the area, witnesses pointed them toward a nearby car wash less than a mile away. That location quickly became a secondary crime scene, with evidence connecting it to the Parker brothers. Meanwhile, first responders rushed Karizma from the gas station to a local hospital. Despite their urgent efforts, the extent of her injuries was catastrophic. Doctors fought to save her, but the number of gunshot wounds left little chance of survival. Within hours, Karizma was pronounced dead. Her death sent shock and grief rippling through her family and the wider community. A young woman who had been full of life and love just moments earlier was gone, her story ending in violence that made no sense to those who knew her. For those at the gas station that night, the emotional impact was immediate. Strangers cried and comforted one another, shaken by what they had just witnessed. Others stood in disbelief, unable to process how quickly everything had changed. Word spread quickly through Durham, reaching friends, relatives, and community members who could not believe that Karizma was gone. The brutality of the attack, not just the loss but the sheer scale of it, left people reeling. For her family, the news was almost unbearable. They had already experienced tragedy when Karizma's brother Tyrick was killed in 2020. Now, less than 3 years later, they were facing another devastating loss. As night turned into morning, Durham police confirmed the details. A 21-year-old woman had been fatally shot, and 2 brothers were in custody for her murder. The city awoke to headlines that felt heavy and cruel. A community that had hoped for a quiet weekend was instead left mourning another life lost to senseless violence. Karizma's final moments at the gas station were not just another statistic. They represented the painful reality of how fragile life can be when guns and anger collide. For her family, friends, and everyone who heard her story, the night of October 7, 2022, would never be. The investigation quickly revealed the shocking identities of the 2 suspects involved in Karizma Mebane's death: 23-year-old Jaquez Reddick and his younger brother, 18-year-old Tracy Crawford. The revelation that 2 siblings were at the center of such a brutal act added another disturbing layer to an already devastating crime. Both young men were living in Durham at the time, sharing a household with their mother. Neighbors later described them as ordinary in appearance, blending into the community without drawing much attention. They were not notorious troublemakers, nor did they have the kind of long criminal rap sheets many would expect from suspects in such a violent case. This contrast between their backgrounds and the crime they were accused of committing left investigators and the public with unsettling questions. Court filings would later shed light on certain aspects of their lives. Tracy Crawford, though only 18, was both a student and a father. He balanced classes with the responsibilities of young parenthood, which made his alleged involvement in such a horrific act difficult for many to comprehend. People close to him struggled with the contradiction. How could someone who was supposed to be focused on building a future and raising a child find himself accused of firing bullets into a young woman's body at a neighborhood gas station? His older brother, Jaquez, was 23 and had been seen as more independent. The 2 lived together under their mother's roof, navigating young adulthood side by side. While their bond as brothers was clear, the idea that they might have carried out an act of violence together shook the community to its core. What could possibly drive siblings to such an extreme? When investigators and prosecutors pieced together their profiles, one detail stood out. Neither brother had a long history of arrests or known gang involvement. This was not a case of hardened criminals with a long trail of violence behind them. Instead, it seemed to emerge suddenly, an eruption of violence without the typical buildup. That factor made the crime even harder to process. Theories about motive began circulating, but answers were few. Some wondered whether a personal conflict had escalated beyond control, while others speculated about mistaken identity or even a rash decision made in anger. Yet with no clear explanation presented at the time, the killings seemed senseless, leaving Karizma's family and the broader Durham community haunted by the lack of closure. The chilling factor was not just the brutality of the shooting, but the idea that two brothers, still so young, could turn their lives, and someone else's, upside down in a matter of seconds. Tracy, barely an adult and already a father, and Jaquez, just beginning his mid-20s, faced the weight of murder charges that would alter their futures forever. To this day, the unanswered questions about motive remain a dark shadow over the case. Why would two young men with no long history of violence take part in such a crime? Was it a planned attack, a sudden flare of rage, or something else entirely? Without clear answers, the community is left with speculation and sorrow. The story of Jaquez Reddick and Tracy Crawford is more than just the record of two suspects in a case. It is a reminder of how quickly choices can destroy lives, not only the life of the victim, but the lives of the accused, their families, and everyone touched by the tragedy. In the hours following Karizma Mebane's killing, detectives in Durham moved with remarkable speed. The brazen nature of the shooting, carried out at a busy gas station in plain view, left little room for hesitation. By the next day, less than 24 hours later, police announced that two suspects had been taken into custody, brothers Jaquez Reddick and Tracy Crawford. Both were quickly charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors made it clear they were treating the case with the utmost severity, pointing to the sheer number of shots fired and the public setting of the attack. This was not going to be handled as a manslaughter or a lesser offense. The charges signaled the belief that the killing had been intentional and deliberate. Surveillance cameras mounted at the gas station played a crucial role in the investigation. Though officials did not release all of the footage to the public, authorities confirmed that it captured the confrontation and the gunfire. Combined with witness testimony from those who were pumping gas or driving past at the time, the evidence provided investigators with enough clarity to identify the suspects almost immediately. Witnesses described a chaotic and terrifying scene, multiple shots ringing out, Karizma collapsing near her vehicle, and two men fleeing in the aftermath. Some recognized the shooters, while others could only give descriptions. Yet taken together, their accounts painted a consistent picture, one that aligned with the images recovered from the station's cameras. Despite the swift arrests and charges, a cloud of uncertainty remained over the case. The biggest question, why, was left unanswered. Law enforcement officials never confirmed a motive, leaving the public to speculate. Was it personal? Was there a conflict between Karizma and the suspects that had escalated into violence? Or was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Without answers, the story felt unfinished, and the sense of unease across Durham only deepened. Local media outlets followed the developments closely, reporting not only on the arrests but on the broader concerns the shooting highlighted. Gas stations had long been seen as volatile spaces where arguments could quickly turn violent, but the scale of this killing shocked even seasoned residents. For many, the fact that a young woman was targeted so viciously reinforced the sense that nowhere felt safe. Community members voiced both grief and frustration. Some mourned Karizma's loss as another young life cut short in Durham's ongoing struggle with violence. Others questioned how two young men with relatively clean records could find themselves at the center of such a brutal act. The lack of a motive only fueled anger and confusion, making it harder for the family and the city to process the tragedy. The arrests brought temporary relief, but they did not bring peace. With first-degree murder charges filed, the justice system would now take its course. Yet in the background, the unanswered questions lingered, leaving a hole in the narrative that no court filing could fully close. For Karizma Mebane's family, the days that followed her death were marked by unimaginable grief. Losing a daughter, a sister, and a friend in such a violent way left wounds that no words could fully describe. Her loved ones remembered her as a young woman with a bright smile and a generous heart, someone who carried warmth wherever she went. Her stepfamily spoke openly about her impact, saying that Karizma had touched countless lives. She wasn't just another name in a headline. She was part of a close-knit family circle, a person whose presence brought comfort to those around her. For them, her absence was more than tragic. It was a void that could never be filled. The pain was only deepened by the fact that Karizma's death wasn't the family's first tragedy. Just 2 years earlier, they had lost her brother, Tarek Gaddis, who was killed in 2020. Now, with Karizma gone as well, her parents and siblings faced the devastating reality of losing 2 children in such a short span of time. That double loss weighed heavily on the family's spirit. In the midst of their heartbreak, faith and prayer became a source of strength. Relatives leaned on one another, on their church, and on the support of neighbors. Public statements often reflected a hope that justice would be served, but also a call for healing, a recognition that the community itself was hurting, not just the family. Across Durham, outrage grew as word spread about the nature of the attack. People were horrified that a young woman could be shot more than 20 times in public with little explanation as to why. Candlelight vigils and social media posts carried messages of support for Karizma's loved ones, while also demanding answers and accountability. For her family, the support offered by the community was a small comfort in an otherwise unbearable moment. Friends and strangers alike joined in honoring Karizma's life, ensuring that her story would not be forgotten. And while the grief was overwhelming, those who knew her best chose to remember her with love, clinging to the light she brought into their lives even in the face of such profound loss. One of the most striking realities in the case of Karizma Mebane is how quickly everything changed. A simple stop at a gas station, something millions of people do every day without a second thought, became the final chapter of her life. It's a painful reminder that violence often strikes without warning. In the blink of an eye, families are left shattered and communities are left searching for answers. This case also highlights the broader issue of gun violence in America. Across the country, incidents like this continue to unfold, young lives lost, families grieving, and communities left in fear. While every story is unique, the patterns are disturbingly familiar. A weapon in the wrong hands, a confrontation that escalates too quickly, and the ripple effect that follows: grief, outrage, and unanswered questions. In looking at Karizma's case, many wonder what could have been done differently. How do we prevent tragedies like this from happening again? The answers aren't simple, but there are several areas where meaningful steps can be taken. One area is security at gas stations and convenience stores. These locations are often hotspots for violence because they're open late, heavily trafficked, and sometimes underprotected. Better lighting, visible security cameras, and regular patrols could help reduce the risk of confrontations turning deadly. Even the presence of on-site security personnel during late hours might serve as a deterrent to violence. Community policing and engagement are also important. When police officers build relationships with residents, when they're seen as part of the neighborhood rather than outsiders, it creates trust. That trust can lead to earlier interventions, quicker tips, and a stronger sense of shared responsibility for safety. Beyond immediate security measures, long-term solutions must focus on youth intervention and mentorship. Both suspects in Karizma's case were young men, one of them still a teenager. The question becomes, what if they had been reached earlier, guided toward better paths, or supported with opportunities that might have redirected their choices? Programs that connect young people with mentors, job training, or positive community activities can make a difference before violence becomes an option. Gun control and safety initiatives are another crucial piece of the conversation. While debates over policy often become polarized, the core issue is undeniable. Easy access to firearms increases the likelihood of deadly encounters. Strengthening background checks, promoting safe storage practices, and encouraging responsible ownership are all measures that could reduce the risk of tragedies like this one. But prevention isn't only about policy or policing, it's also personal. Karizma's story urges us to reflect on the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing those we love. None of us know how much time we truly have. Taking a moment to call a friend, hug a family member, or simply appreciate the ordinary moments can mean everything when life feels uncertain. For Karizma's family, the loss is permanent, but her story carries lessons that extend far beyond Durham. It calls on us to ask hard questions. How do we make our neighborhoods safer? How do we create environments where young people don't see violence as a path? And how do we ensure that tragedies like this aren't simply remembered, but used as a catalyst for change? As we close this chapter of the documentary, I leave you with two questions. Do you think justice will be served in this case? And what do you believe communities can do to prevent tragedies like this from happening again? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your perspective matters. As we come to the end of Karizma Mebane's story, we're left with both sorrow and reflection. She was only 21 years old, a young woman from Durham, North Carolina, with her whole future ahead of her. Known for her warmth and the love she gave to her family and friends, Karizma was more than just a victim in a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend whose life was stolen far too soon. On the night of October 7, 2022, a routine stop at a gas station ended in tragedy. Karizma was shot multiple times, an attack so brutal that it shook her community to its core. Within a day, police arrested two brothers, Jaquez Reddick and Tracy Crawford, charging them with first-degree murder. Yet even with the arrests, the lingering question of why has never been answered. The lack of a clear motive has left her family and community with more questions than closure. In the aftermath, her loved ones have leaned on one another for strength, remembering the light Karizma brought into their lives. Her stepfamily described how she touched so many people, how her kindness left an imprint that will never fade. But for them, the pain is doubled, having already lost her brother Tyrick just 2 years earlier. 2 young lives taken too soon, leaving behind a family that has endured unimaginable grief. This tragedy is not just Karizma's story. It is a reflection of a larger issue facing communities across the country. Gun violence continues to steal lives in moments that feel random, sudden, and senseless. It forces us to confront how fragile life is and how much we need to work toward prevention and change. Whether through stronger community bonds, youth intervention programs, or common-sense safety measures, every step matters in protecting lives like Karizma's. As we honor her memory, let's remember her not only for the way she died, but for the love she gave while she lived. The best way to keep her story alive is to ensure that her name is not forgotten, and that her death sparks conversations about how to make our communities safer. So I'll leave you with these questions. What do you think really happened that night? And how do you believe we can honor victims like Karizma by building communities where tragedies like this are less likely to occur? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Evil Behind Crime, like this video, and share it with others who care about seeking justice and remembering those we've lost. Together we can keep these stories alive, not just as cases, but as reminders of lives that mattered.
A family is now grieving the murder of another loved one after a deadly shooting in Durham. 21-year-old Karizma Mebane was shot and killed on Friday night. Just 2 years ago, her family also buried her brother. WRAL's Durham reporter Sarah Kruger is live now from the Durham County Courthouse with what she's learned about the victim and 2 people charged now. Sarah?
Deborah, I came here to the courthouse to look for any warrants related to this case. What I found in the documents is that each suspect is listed as living at the same address, each with their mother, so it appears the 2 men are brothers. I also found that neither has any prior criminal history.
In only 21 years, Karizma Mebane left her mark on the world. I spoke by phone with Shaniqua Spencer. She's Mebane's stepsister, but says they were so close, they just called themselves sisters.
Very genuine, the purest heart. No, she was out living her life. She's young. She was just enjoying life at the time.
Spencer says the family was still recovering from the loss of their brother, Tyrick Gaddies, who was murdered in Alamance County in 2020.
A situation where he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now I have my sister Karizma taken due to gun violence. And I feel like the same situation. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Durham police say Mebane was shot Friday night on Cheek Road near this mini-mart. A spokesperson says it does not appear to be random. Within 24 hours, they had arrested 2 people for her murder, 23-year-old Jaquez Reddick and 18-year-old Tracy Crawford. Court documents show neither of the men has a criminal history.
We have no idea who they are.
She hopes to use her traumatic situation as a way to help others going through the same thing.
I feel like I'm here. I have a purpose in life. I am, as their sister, hoping to start a nonprofit group that helps people, because in my community, so many people have lost their loved ones to gun violence. It's everywhere. It's not just Durham. It's everywhere.
And court documents also show that the youngest suspect, who is only 18, is in the 10th grade and has a son of his own that he supports, just adding to this tragedy. As for funeral plans for Mebane, those are still being sorted out. Deborah.
So much pain for that family. Sarah Kruger live at the Durham County Courthouse. Thank you, Sarah.